So we'll be doing 2 classes per week. And within that period of 5 weeks, we are supposed to cover most of the basic fundamentals of Revit, most of the basic stuff that you're supposed to know in order for you to navigate Revit from a beginner before we start the advanced topics. So first of all, we go to the course deliverables. So for the course, we are going to be doing a project, because I believe we cannot just be learning without a project. So for this course, I modeled a project. There's a project that we're supposed to be doing. As we are learning, we are also doing a project. And within the project, you'll be able to, there'll be daily tasks. So every time we learn, you get let's say some kind of homework that you're supposed to do for the project. And then at the end of the day, or the next time we meet, we start from where we left off with the homework, then we can fuel. But the homework is not the issue. The most important thing is that we are here to understand the essential user interface of Revit. So everything basically about Revit, the user interface in Revit. The user interface is basically what you can see when you open Revit. Everything, every bit of information, every bit of icon that you can see, we want to be able to understand all of that. And second, lastly, we want to understand the basic proficiency in modeling, detailing, and visualization. Revit, we call it an intelligent, it's an intelligent design tool, because as per Revit, the building, according to Revit, the building that you're designing, or whatever you're designing in Revit, we say it has life. There's information behind that building. So for every component, there's information. That's why we're calling a building information model. In Revit, we call them building information models, because for every component we're designing, there's information behind each particular component. So for this course, we want you to understand, basically I call it BIM. The third point is basic proficiency in modeling, detailing, and visualization. This is what we call building information modeling. And then you'll be able to understand 90% of essential Revit user interface and architecture tools, because we are covering architecture. I know Revit is wide. We have structure, we have mechanical, we have electrical and stuff. We have so much that Revit covers, but for now, our main focus will be architecture. So we'll be designing a building architecturally. We'll not be doing the columns or beams, because that's beyond the scope of this course, and those are advanced things. So we'll be designing just a basic building architecturally, and then later on, because I have a friend who also understands MEP, we are working together. So maybe later on, we can introduce the Revit MEP, and then you can be able to learn about how to model the pipes and the electrical stuff inside the Revit model. So those are the course deliverables: understanding BIM, understanding Revit user interface, and modeling a 4-bedroom mansionette. And then next, now this is a breakdown of what we'll be covering each week per week, what we'll be covering in the model or in the project. So for the first week, we have foundations and project setup. So the first lesson will be the Revit interface mastery, and then project initialization. So in this first lesson, or the first day of the first week, the first day of the 2 days in a week, we'll be covering the user interface. We'll be touring the ribbon. I'm not sure. Let me just try to present my. I want to present my Revit screen so that you can see what we mean by user interface, even though we are not covering the user interface now, because you're supposed to cover it at the first lesson. For those of you who will sign up. So if you'll sign up for the course, then you will be able to see what we mean by but I can show you to it now. So you can be able to see what we mean by the user interface. So this is the Revit, this is Revit, this is the Revit window. And then for the Revit window, I'm sure my screen is small, but I'll try to, I'll try to present what I can. So this is the user interface, whatever you're able to see with your eyes, because you're the user, this is your interface. This is everything that you have access to that helps you in the model. So as you can see up here, we have all the tabs that you need. I'm not going to teach because for this particular course, we are not supposed to be covering this. This is for those who will sign up. If you'll sign up, then maybe you can get to understand everything that we have here in the screen. So, but I'll just show you. We have the architecture tab, we have the structure tab, we have the concrete, we have steel, then we have systems. And then systems basically is the plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And then we have these other tabs that are common for most other softwares. So this is what we'll be covering. Part of what we'll be covering in the first week. You'll be understanding everything about the interface that you'll be familiar with in order to design something in Revit. So another thing, after the first lesson on Revit, the user interface mastery, after you've mastered the user interface, then we can go in the second lesson of that same week. We'll start with the schematic design, because I'm sure most of us have a design background, and before you start design, there's usually a concept that inspires that design. So with Revit also, there's a way that you can conceptualize your model before you even start designing. So you can conceptualize your model. But because we'll be doing mansionette, I'm not sure whether we would want to have inspiration for a mansionette. It's just a simple project. You can think of a rectangle or even a square, whatever the case may be. Whatever building you decide to do, the shape doesn't matter. So for now, I'll just teach you massing, how you can mass in future. But for this particular project that we'll be doing for this, you'll not need to master actually massing for your concepts. But massing is important, and we'll touch on it so that you can see how important it is and how you can apply it later on, even in your projects, especially for those who are starting design. Yeah, it's very important that you understand concepts, how to develop them, and how to navigate them so that it can give you an idea of the end product that you're visualizing in your project. So after the schematic design and massing, the lesson, this is the first week. This is the end of the first week. After the first week, so basically you'll have the basic facing and design options. Then we can go to the second week. The second week, now we'll be starting with the core building elements. Now, core building elements, I mean the elements that make up a building. Starting from walls, then we have doors, we have windows, everything that makes up a building. Those are the core building elements. So first of all, we'll start with the exterior walls and envelope. For the exterior walls, basically we'll do walls. So walls, there are types, then there's structure, because some walls are made of different materials. Different walls are made of different materials, and that's what we'll take a look at. And then we'll edit the walls. For instance, if you want to change the thickness of a wall, if you want to change the material of a wall, if you want to change whatever you want to change about a wall, you can change it. We can change it in Revit. So another thing is aligning, attaching, and constraining walls. So usually in Revit, there's a default height for all walls. So usually we have to constrain it to a particular height so that we can model with that particular height. So we'll teach you also how to restrain your walls. We'll teach you how to attach two walls. We'll teach you to align your walls so that if the two walls that you want them to align but they're in different positions, there's a technique that you can use to align them together. And then on the second week, the first lesson, we'll also model exterior walls. This is the practical for the building we'll be doing. We'll model exterior walls for the upper and the whatever number of floors we'll be having for the project. We'll model the upper and the lower floors. This exterior walls only. And then for our UI focus, we'll have temporary dimensions, alignment tools, and wall joints. Everything here, we'll cover it, and I'll show you in Revit. I'll show you when we'll be doing the actual model in Revit. And then still in the second week, the second lesson, the second week, we'll be doing then interior walls, the doors, and the windows. So interior walls, the difference between walls in Revit, just as I said as I was beginning, Revit, the elements in Revit, they have life. Each has a unique identification. So unlike other design softwares, we cannot take a Revit, an exterior wall, and then convert it into an interior wall. We have to create another new wall for the interior. That's why we have a different lesson for the interior and for the exterior walls, because you cannot, because if you create an exterior wall, it has a different property. If we try to modify that property, then the exterior wall will not be exterior and will turn into interior. So we have to duplicate or create a new layer of wall so that we can fit it into the interior wall properties. We have to create new properties for interior walls. So that's what we'll be covering in the second lesson of the second week. And then we'll also do doors, windows, and openings. So for interior partitions, after we do the walls, I'll show you how to model a door, because in Revit, if you don't want to, import the object into your project, if you have a custom door, that you think has a unique design and unique properties, you don't have to download the material from the internet. You can just create your own door. We create a family. Then we call it a door. And then we can model the door to fit whatever we want. So we can create a custom door for any particular project that we want. That's the beauty of Revit. I think I've also used ArchiCAD, and I know ArchiCAD cannot design doors. ArchiCAD usually comes with custom-made doors, which you can modify properties, but you cannot really create a new door. But Revit allows you to create. You can create, if you want to create a new door, you can create, you can define the materials, you can define the panels that are the division panels, how many panels you want the door to be divided to. If you want to add a glass panel into the door, you can also define that in Revit. Everything that you want to know about a door, even a window, we can create a custom window. We can give it a material, maybe aluminum. We can add glass. We can add all those components. So for those of you who sign up, you can get to experience whatever we are talking about. And then we'll talk about family loading and basic editing. So for doors and windows, we are dealing with doors and windows. So there are also other families that, sometimes you don't need to design, because it's time consuming. So you can just load into a project. For those of you who've used ArchiCAD, we can load objects into a project. So in Revit, you can also load, but they're not objects, they're called families. So you can load a door family into your project and then use it for your particular design. So that's what we call family loading and basic editing. And then we go to the third week. In the third week, we'll be covering vertical elements and structure. So for these ones, we'll be covering floors, ceilings, and roofs, firstly. So we'll start with the creation of a floor. Basically, it's a slab. So this is a slab. We'll talk about how to design, how to insert. Yeah, that's the right term. I was looking for that term. So how to insert a slab into a project. Basically, how you draw, and then you can vary the thickness, and then we can play with the material, and then we can play with the texture so that its appearance in the project, either in the plan or in the 3D, we'll see how it can be altered in any situation. And then and then for floors, slabs, and also finishes. We'll also be doing ceilings and advanced roofing, hip, gable, flat with parapets. And then we'll be doing roof. We'll create a roof, edit the roof. We can create custom roofs. We can create, just like many other design softwares, it's flexible. You can create a custom roof, either hipped or gable, or whatever kind of a roof, gantry, mansard, all the types of roofs can be created in Revit with everything. And then for the user interface basically is what you see. So when I put UI here, UI is basically the tools that are around the screen that can help you to edit the particular element that you're talking about. If you're talking about the roof is here. So if you want to put a roof, but I'm not allowed to do this here because we have not started these lessons yet. But basically, we'll be talking about how to edit a roof, how to edit its components, everything about a roof, as you can see on my screen. So we'll be talking about basic roofs. There are various types of roofs that we'll be talking about: basic, generic, steel truss, all of the roofs that we'll be talking about. So we'll be covering them extensively when we start our lessons. So I hope you sign up. And then this is the first week, first day. This is the first lesson of the third week. And then for the second lesson of the third week, we'll be doing staircase, railings, and openings. So for staircase, we'll look at various stairs. That is multi-flight stairs, landings, and custom railings. We'll look at the floor to ceiling openings for double volume spaces and grand staircases. This is basically the what we call headroom. That is headroom, how you can set up stairs for different head spaces, and how many landings you can incorporate in, how many landings are allowed to be incorporated into, because Revit has restrictions. You cannot just create a stair that runs about, let's say, 5 meter or 6 meter up. You have to include a landing at some point, and Revit has restrictions. That's why I'm saying Revit is very intelligent. So you are supposed to create a landing midway or anywhere in between, so that you can be on the right. And then we'll be having floor to ceiling openings for double volume spaces for grand staircases, and then railing adjustments and custom profiles. These are things we'll be covering in the second lesson of the third week. And then we can go to week 4. Week 4, we'll be doing detailing, we'll be doing families, and we'll be doing site. So detailing, first of all, we'll be doing families. Just as I said, objects in Revit, they are called families. They are not just objects, because everything is loadable as a family. For instance, if you want to put a chair, if you've designed a space, you want to connect and then get with
Sorry, Juma. You are breaking. We can't quite hear you well. Yes, maybe you can check up on that. You can give it a try. Sorry, Juma. So yeah, you can check up on your network. I believe is the issue. Yes, and you can or you can try rejoining. You leave, then you try rejoining. We get to see if it improves. So, but in the meantime, Juma was taking us through whatever. Hello, Juma. You can give it a try. You get to see.
Okay. Can you be able to hear?
Yeah. You can proceed.
Did I lose you far away?
Not really. Actually, that's fine.
Okay. So I was talking about what we'll be doing in the fourth week. Fourth week, first lesson, we'll be doing, just as I said, families. We'll be diving into families. And families, just as I said, they're basically objects. In other softwares, they're called objects, like chairs, tables, dining equipment, beds, everything basically that you put inside a house. In Revit, they're called families. So we'll be doing families, and apart from families, we'll also be covering materials. That is, in case you want to render for rendering purposes, and you want to apply a certain material or a certain texture to the exterior of your wall. So we'll be covering materials in general. and how you can apply them to even to your objects, basically families. You can alter the materials making up the family, particular family, and then you can change the color basically of a particular family. You can change the color of your walls. You can change the color of whatever you want to change. So this is the beauty of Revit. Everything is customizable. Everything is editable. But because there are restrictions, and we learn about those when we get into the course. And then for the second lesson in the fourth week, we'll be doing site development and landscaping. In the fourth week, we'll be developing a landscape. A landscape, this is basically the place where our site will be sitting. And it's important to note that we can also alter our landscape if you want to include some hills or some streams. If you want to include a swimming pool, we have features so that we can edit all of that into a project. So we'll be doing the topo surface, building parts, retaining walls, and driveways. Retaining walls are basically walls that, for this case, retaining walls are walls that are built underground. That is under the topographical surface that we'll be creating. And then there are site components like trees, landscaping, and fences. We'll learn also how to incorporate them or to put them into the project. And then for our project, we'll develop the grounds, pool deck area, and the grading. And for the advanced tools, we'll be doing the topo surface editing and graded options. Basically, topo surface editing means that we can alter our landscape if we want to have hills or mountains or some valleys or some, just, we can play with our landscape to look, it doesn't have to look flat, but it can look wavy or shady. But it can have something in the background, and we can alter all of that in Revit, just like we can. For those of you who used Blender, the way you can alter a surface or Unreal Engine is the same way you can alter in Revit. But that is GPU intensive, as I can say. This is the 8th lesson. That is in the 4th week. Lesson number 8. We'll be doing site development and landscaping. And then in the 5th week after landscaping, we've done everything on the inside. Now we start to document everything because we are doing a project, and I'm assuming most of us are students, or most of us, want to learn for the sake of our future, or for the sake of designing in future, or for the sake of designing for someone, designing on site, and we must be able to put whatever we're designing into a document. So in the 5th week, we'll be doing a documentation, visualization, and advanced basics. So that is the 5th week. For the first lesson in the 5th week, we'll be creating views. We'll be creating views, that is plans, elevations, sections, 3 dimensions, perspectives, and details. So for plans basically are plans, the 2D representation of whatever you're drawing. And then elevations are side views, right views, or even back views of whatever we are constructing. Sections basically is a cut through of a section of the building. And then 3 dimensions, all of you know that it's a 3 dimension, whatever we can see with our own eyes. And then perspectives. Perspectives are basically perspectives. I'm sure you know what perspectives are. I'm not finding the right words to explain perspectives. Able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was worried that you're not able to hear. So saying perspectives, I'm sure you understand 1 point, 2 point perspectives, basically what we can see. And then we'll also be covering details, perspectives and details. And then we'll also be doing dimensions, and then we'll be doing tags. Tags are text that you can put on, let's say, on a door to tell us more about the door. Tag basically is a description that you can put either in a room, in a door, for any particular component, to give us more, to tell us more about the particular component, or more about the room, or more about something. And then we have legends. We create legends. Basically, if there's anything in the plan that is not self-explanatory, then you create a legend. and then you label the legend so that it can be referred to with regards to the drawing. And then schedules. Schedules are automatic. They're automatically generated because Revit, just as I said, Revit is intelligent, and it usually stores properties of each particular component. And then whenever you want to derive those properties for that particular component, Revit will tell you, will create a schedule for you, schedule for material. If you want to know how much material you have, Revit can create that schedule. Also, how many windows you have, how many doors. That's where we have door schedule, window schedule, wall schedule. Revit can create all of that. Then we have setting up title blocks. I'm sure most of us should be familiar with title blocks because we've done drawings in the past. Title blocks, basically how you design your sheet with your information and the project information and the client information, every information that you need to share with your particular person or the particular person who will be receiving the drawing, so that you can tell them more about the drawing. That's what we call a title block. And then UI mastery, view templates, filters, and then just as I said, UI means user interface. So for the interface, these are basically the things that are on the screen. These are things that are on the screen that will help us to learn this lesson, that this particular lesson that we'll be doing in this particular week. So that we call UI mastery. Lastly, the second lesson in the 5th week will be doing visualization, coordination, and course project finalization. So for this one, we'll be doing basic rendering, and it will be for those who have powerful enough machines to render still in Revit, because Revit is heavy on rendering. And I think I'd advise, if you want to render anything that you do in Revit, you use an external rendering engine, because the engine within Revit is GPU intensive. And if you don't have a GPU, then it can be stressful. So we'll be doing basic rendering, lighting, materials, and walk through cameras. So I'll tell you how to do your cameras mostly, materials also. Lighting will just be setting up the sun. I'll not be doing interior lights. You'll just know how to set up the sun so that you can take a good view, which will produce a good render. And then secondly, we'll be doing phasing, design options, and linking models. But this one is advanced, so we'll not be doing so much of it, because we're talking about linking models between different softwares, or even between this a collaboration. So basically, when you're doing a collaborative project with other consultants, usually this is what we use, linking models. And then we'll also export and DWG, PDF, and images and printing. So we'll be exporting. I'll show you how to export the Revit model that you just created into a DWG format, PDF, or even an image if you want an image. And then we'll print. Then lastly, we'll review all of the UI elements, and then we can see whether we can go into the next steps, Revit and MEP basics. And for the final project, I think for those who will make it to the end, maybe I can do, for the project we're doing, because the project we are currently working on is a coordination project, basically between so many consultants, and it's into one Revit model. And it's interesting, actually, if you look at how the plumbing fits into the walls of the building, how the electrical fits into the same building, how the slabs are done. And then maybe at the end of the lesson, we can, at the end of the course, maybe for some of you who will still be there, just as well as said, very few people can bear with the course to the end and finish it. But just as if you are able to do it and finish the course and keep up with the assignments, because the assignments will determine whether you'll finish the course. So if you finish, then you can get a full model, a full coordination model that includes the walls, that includes the pipes, the plumbing pipes, all in one model, so that you can look at whatever coordination Revit can do. Yeah, so that is part and most of what I'll be covering for this course. And forgot to mention, we'll be doing also the model is supposed to include some aspects of sustainability, but we have not incorporated that yet. But we'll incorporate it into the project so that you'll be doing not only Revit. At some point, you'll be doing also green build. That is the sustainability aspect of the course. Will not be covering exclusively Revit during the 5 weeks. So there are some days that we'll be covering GB. What is it called? You'll be covering the green aspects of a building. So you'll be taught how to incorporate some green aspects into a design. And then for this project, if you incorporate it into your project, then maybe that can earn you a better. So that's all from me, unless there is a question about Revit.
Awesome. Let's appreciate our tutor Joshua. It's a very wide course with a lot to learn. So, and thank you so much, Joshua, for taking us through. Yes, I see we have a question from Jonathan. So, Jonathan, I wish to welcome you so that you can present your question. Karibu sana, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you very much, Joshua, Mr. Joshua, for the presentation. I hope you can hear me all.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. You've gone through the course very in depth, but my question is, well, how will you tackle the measurements and the taking off of quantities? Because I am a quantity surveying student from the University of Nairobi, so my concern is how do we handle the taking off of quantities and the measurements and the costing as well. You mentioned it briefly under dimensions, something to do with dimensions, but could you go further into depth with that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that question. I hope, Joshua, you are recording. I wish maybe we take a round of questions, then we get to answer them together. If you are there and you have any question, you can also raise your hand or you can have it in the chat box. Anyone else? So Joshua, you can answer that. I believe that's the only question that we have.
Okay, I heard your question, but we'll be covering design basically. The course is meant to cover design. Maybe I'll give you concepts of how you can get quantities and measurements of whatever we'll design, and then maybe, but we'll not be doing. This is not a cost estimation course. We'll not be doing cost estimation for the project we are doing. Maybe in future we can incorporate that. But I'll show you how to do quantities. Like as you can see in this project, it has measurements. So if you are talking about basically measurements so that you can use them for your BQ, then maybe you can just take the measurements from the drawing. But if we are talking about actual scheduling using the software, we'll not be covering that. It's allow me to say it's beyond the scope. And if I were to include all of that stuff, then we'll miss out on other basic stuff that you're supposed to cover, because the course is still supposed to be covering sustainability and it's not been included. So we are still fighting for space on where we'll fit it and whether we'll be able to cover all the basics plus the sustainability and still be able to have time. But for the costing, we'll talk about schedules that maybe you can use. Because we will be having schedules and they are wall schedules if you want to quantity of walls, because Revit can give you the exact. If we are talking about external walls, then Revit can give you the exact length and area. Basically it does the area or even the length. If you want the length, we can modify it to give the length. Then maybe you can use the length to take off and use it for your bills of quantities. But the bottom line is that scheduling, cost estimation is a bit above whatever we'll be covering in this course. We wanted to start with the basics, then cover the basics, and then maybe later on we can jump into cost estimation and stuff. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, so thank you. That's perfect. If it's just basics, I think I'll still get some value from it. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Joshua. Also, to add up on the same, for Jonathan, I believe we are QS. So we have a plain Swift course, plan Swift, that is. So here we are taking off, and also now all about now measurement. So I would highly recommend that. Now for Revit, because it's good you get to understand at ukipewa Revit, maybe a drawing in Revit, how the person was able to come up with a drawing. It's give you that understanding. So I would highly recommend Plan Swift, but also Revit will give you also an understanding on whatever it's all about. So thank you so much for that. So for design, we GBA offer 2 courses. That's the Revit, and we also have ArchiCAD. So Revit watu hulia sana ni ngumu, but if you feel Revit inaweza kuwa ngumu kwako, especially if you are a beginner kabisa, like you haven't interacted with this design software, I would recommend ArchiCAD also. ArchiCAD, maybe I consider it inakaa rahisi. It's easier compared to Revit, because now Revit has everything. Iko na MEP, though hata ArchiCAD iko na MEP also, but you can consider ArchiCAD also, but it's based on you. You get to evaluate if you are capable of handling Revit, as we have had. So we only had 1 graduate, the last cohort. So it's based on you. You get to assess if you are capable of handling Revit, especially on your time, getting to see how your time is like. Yes, so there's a question by Perry on maybe on the technicality about the laptop based on the software. So Joshua, in 1 minute, maybe you can answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Perry Quisley, I see your question. You're talking about someone who doesn't have that software on their laptop and they're willing to learn and get through to Revit. So the first lesson that we usually do on that particular course that we're doing, usually the first lesson I do is before the lesson. If we're already in the group, then I'll send you a Revit, and then I'll send you the procedure for getting it, or even downloading it or cracking it, as you can say. So, but I recommend if you're a student, you can just use your email. Then you can get access to the Autodesk products for free. They are free for students for all the years that you're in campus. So if you're a student, you can just take advantage of using the email that you're given by the school, and then you can access all the products from Autodesk for free. But if you're not a student and you want Revit out here, then the first lesson we'll be doing, then I'll teach you how to handle the installation plus the cracking. Is that okay?
Thank you. I think Perry is well answered. Thank you so much. So with that, we come to the conclusion of our webinar this evening, where we were talking about Revit and also the